Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm doing another video right now on the high conflict co-parenting, high conflict. Uh, if you watched my previous video on self-care, this one is a little bit of a continuation. If you haven't watched it, I would really recommend it. It's super important that if you're dealing with a high conflict situation, trying to co-parent, dealing with court, trying to parent, and all that stuff, I would highly recommend going back and watching that video, and also make sure you subscribe and help me out. Like and subscribe and stay tuned, because I'm going to keep working with this. I created this infographic and we're going to kind of keep it going. And for this video though, specifically, I'm going to talk about why you should not seek to decrease the conflict. That should not be your goal, and what you should do instead. Okay. So I'm going to go back to this infographic that I made, because once again, the tendency for these situations, it just has many components, and they all interact with each other. You cannot make adjustments in one without the other ones. Okay, swing. Okay, and high conflict types, we call them that because they resort basically to anger and using fear as a weapon. They want to make you afraid. They want you to be afraid of them. It's a powerful weapon. This is a tactic or a manipulation tactic that is sometimes in the business called like a power play or power control, using anger and aggression to control the situation because people avoid conflict. Now, the caretaking parent is often a codependent parent who has an overactive, again, in my previous video, they tend to have an overactive limbic system. And that says, if you, I know you can't see it, it says managing anxiety. There's a ton of anxiety. Sometimes there's panic. And in this particular dynamic, their limbic system is so overactive and it's just seeking self-preservation that it will basically do anything to avoid the conflict, because it's trying to manage the anxiety and the panic that is centered around the trauma. And so therefore, decreasing the conflict, going back up here, becomes the highest goal, becomes the, and unfortunately, that is just generally what I found, is that the caretaking parent or the low conflict parent, because they're wanting to manage their anxiety and decrease their panic, they immediately default to decreasing conflict or avoiding anger or avoiding doing anything that might make their high conflict X angry. When you're functioning from your emotions and your fear and the limbic system, it will basically convince you, it doesn't necessarily convince you, but your vision becomes narrow. You suddenly don't see a lot of the other factors and the other dynamics that are super duper important to realize or take into account. For example, high conflict types, I generally find that they are a lot of smoke, but they're not a whole lot of fire. I generally find that they make a lot of noise, but they have really, really poor follow through. They get most of their mileage out of making threats. Get most of their mileage out of using a lot of anger. I've had encounters with high conflict types, narcissistic type parents, that have been the most angry and aggressive parents, adults I have ever dealt with. And it's inappropriate. I don't tolerate it. I end the conversation immediately. I tell them, this is not appropriate. I don't care how incensed or how outraged you feel. Your behavior is out of line, and I'm ending this right now. And I'm a big assertive guy, so it's easier for me. I get a lot more effectiveness out of doing that. And I realize this. It's effective for me, but it's not effective for everybody else. But what ends up happening is it works. They throw a lot of anger and people fold. They get what they want out of it. The payoff is people become afraid, and then they get what they want, right? Their demands are acquiesced just because they don't want to because other people don't want to deal with the conflict. Their fear kicks in and they avoid conflict, and high conflict types use this as a weapon. This is my biggest issue with them. They do this with the kids. And on that note too, and I'll probably do a separate video on this, high conflict types do not distinguish child from adult. They'll treat the children the same way that they treat adults. And that's one of the reasons why I have the biggest issue with them, is that there's no allowances made for children. And I'll get back to that. I'll do that in a different video, so make sure that you subscribe. So what happens is, in order to avoid the trauma from being triggered, wanting to manage anxiety and wanting to manage the panic, they go back up here to decreasing the conflict and giving them, acquiescing to demands and threats and giving them exactly what they want. And it actually reinforces that negative behavior. When you cave to the anger, and this is why it's important to manage anxiety, because you start realizing, like, every time you cave in to that angry response or those threats, you are teaching them to do that again. The more that you cave into their anger, the more likely you are to see that more and more and more in the future, not only towards you, but towards your kids. And so if you want to help your kids, and I want you to help yourself first, but I know that for caretaking types, that's a big ask. It is extremely difficult. I mean, it's like asking someone to climb Mount Everest, almost, to ask the caretaking parent to take care of themselves. It's a big ask. And so if you're going to do this, and if you're going to stop learning or start learning to not care whether or not they get angry at you, you must do it for the kids. If that helps motivate you, then great. Because as long as you are afraid of their anger, one of the few remaining barriers to protect your kids is gone. And quite frankly, a lot of people believe that the court will protect the kids. Not in my experience. In fact, the court does a very poor job with this. If you believe that the court will protect your children, you may be gravely disappointed. And I have enough times that I have lost all faith in the family court system. Okay, so decreasing conflict or avoiding the anger should not be your primary goal or your primary desired result. Okay, they are going to increase the conflict. And the thing is the more, what I've learned is that the more that you work to avoid their anger, the more they use it as a weapon, because it works. You're teaching them and training them this works. It's very effective. If they want something, they go straight to anger. Okay, so with all of that being said, you just need to understand how this whole dynamic works. Okay, one of the services that I deal with, or that I offer people, my clients, is working with actually all four of these dynamics. I specialize in parenting. I've ended up specializing more so than I wanted to in co-parenting and dealing with court and attorneys. And obviously, as a therapist, I focus a lot on self-care. So if you want some personal help, I have limited availability, but you can contact me through my website. The link is in the description below. You can also take my online courses for high conflict custody. You can also take my course for high conflict co-parenting. So make sure that you go check out those links. There's a ton of value in those courses. Those courses are, I believe, affordable and extremely beneficial in terms of giving you the information that you need to manage this whole dynamic that you will never get from a judge or attorney. Okay, so hang in there. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.